I was tired of really, attacking legislation against communities of color, against LGBTQ communities, against unions, against all of the things that I value and then most of my neighbors that I speak to value. And I found Tallahassee, the more I studied it, to be just so out of touch with the Florida voter, with the average Floridian, and serving special interests and really focused on culture wars and not attacking this true, it's not just a phrase, an affordability crisis that every single one of us are suffering under, that is directly a result of 30 years of Republican rule. One party rule has harmed us all. We all are harmed by it daily, whether it's in attacking legislation or the cost of property insurance or the cost of healthcare, our public schools being gutted. So about a year ago, I said, you know what, that famous adage, if not me, who, if not now, when? And I got off the bench and I just bet on my community. I talked to dozens, if not hundreds of people throughout the course of a day and a week. And we are all saying the same things, whether we're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. And I focused on those things. I focused on the things that I was actually hearing from my neighbors and not what the Republican legislature would like us to focus on. So I really focused my issues on kitchen table issues and what I was truly hearing from my neighbors. And then we just figured it out as we went. So I'm a first-time candidate. I'd never done anything like this before. I've done a tiny bit of canvassing here and there, in the Obama campaign, some local congressional races, but nothing. I have no official political background. And I said, if all these dummies can figure it out, so can I. So I came in with that mentality: is one, we deserve better, and two, everything is figure outable.
Mm-hmm. I believe in that there's a workaround for everything, and we can figure it out collectively and move in the right direction. Do you recall maybe the specific benchmark moment you said, okay, I'm going to step off the porch, and step forward and go from community member to public servant? Do you recall, was there a specific moment when you said, in my favorite series, Snapped, you snapped and said, no mas?
I was approaching my 40th birthday. I just turned 41 last week. And I had a series of conversations with my husband, because I will say that was very much a family decision. We have 3 elementary age children. So in order for me to take on such an undertaking, this had to be a conversation. But I would say there was a series leading up to it, a 6-week abortion ban. I would say there were 3-4 instigating instances going all the way back to Black Lives Matter during COVID, where I said, this isn't right. We deserve better. This isn't right. We deserve better. And then last summer, we just pulled the trigger as a family. And it truly was a family decision, because without my husband taking over primary caregiving, there's no way to do this, because this is a full contact sport. You have to be all in if you want to affect change. You have to be, meet and greets, building that network of support, financial, but also, the people doing the work with you on the doors. Right. So whether there was a 4-person event or a 40 or 130, I always showed up. I was always grateful. And that took a lot of family support.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is that, much of the attention around your victory focused on Mar-a-Lago being inside the district. But your campaign, as you said, was built around everyday conversations with voters. And we see people manipulating their residences to go in and to try and, run here, and you may not actually live there, but you're inside the community. How did being part of the community shape the way people received your message?
All of those things are true. I do think it added a little bit of extra spice that the president voted by mail, like days after railing against vote by mail. So that was just an extra layer of irony and attention. But yes, the reason that my message resonated is because my children go to school here. I'm on the school advisory council. I'm a small business owner serving postpartum women with fitness programming across the district. So those natural networks that I had just expanded. So, I knew a couple thousand people myself, and then those networks introduced me to all of their friends. And you meet the most wonderful people doing this. Find people that are also just so fed up with the toxicity and partisanship, and also, the horrible policies that are being put in place, both from a social justice perspective and from a cost of living perspective, when of course those both intersect. So you see that the more you do it, most of us see these issues the same way. Most of us are not okay with what's happening, and it's about you communicating your message to inspire them to get off the bench as well and to join you. And that is what I'm just the most proud of this campaign, is all of the first time canvassers that we trained. A lot of us, and I include myself in this description, have never been engaged to this extent, because the stakes are that high and the times are that serious, and it's up to us to save us, because no one is coming to save us.
I talk to corporate people all the time, and I talk about corporate citizenship, not just taking from the community, but being an active participant and giver. And there is a difference between observing a community and actually living, listening, and working inside it. How did that distinction influence the way you campaigned and, the way you plan to legislate?
I think you have to listen more than you talk. So I went into the campaign with an idea of what the issues were, the issues facing my family. And the issues stayed the same, but I also really opened my eyes to challenges that I wasn't personally experiencing, but that my neighbors were. An example I point to is the would-be first-time buyer is just really, really difficult to enter the market right now, with, of course, the property insurance that I'm aware of, which I do think that is the true crisis. But also for the first-time buyer, the property taxes is a real challenge as well, because if they're buying a home that had been homesteaded for 20, 30 years, the new tax bill, will be 500%, 700%. It will be exponential compared to what it was sold at. So I think targeted relief like that, and that's just a situation I hadn't considered, because we purchased our home in 2018. So I think it's really about listening and not staying fixed in ideology. So I changed a little bit on some issues. I still have the same value system that never changed, but I always want to be listening to my neighbors and hearing what they're telling me. So, and differences of opinion on, for me, the number one issue facing my family is public education, and fully funding it and reforming this really problematic universal voucher program. So that's still in the top three, but it wasn't the number one thing I heard at the doors. The number one thing I heard was property insurance and affordable housing.
Wow.
I reframed just in the import that I talked about them to reflect what I heard the most.
Now, this is an off-script question.
Yeah.
What the heck is homestead? And what does that mean as far as home ownership?
So there is a program called Save Our Home. So in Florida, there's if your primary residence is here, so obviously I live here year round. So our home gets a huge deduction in what you pay in property taxes. So it is it keeps the cap year to year really low.
Okay.
So it's not keeping up with market value. So you're getting a huge tax advantage. So that's why a lot of snowbirds live here 6 months and a day so that they can homestead their home and not pay state income tax. So there's huge advantages to having your primary residence, because my tax, if this was, say, our second home, or we owned a home and we're renting a second home, that home that it wasn't your primary residence has a much, much, much higher property tax bill. So it's meant to be a incentive into home ownership. And it worked. It was a very good program for the last 25 years. But the downstream effect of it is, after that house is sold and has enjoyed the benefits of that tax cut and goes on sale again, you go from like a $2,500 or lower tax bill to like a $12,000 tax bill. Yeah, it's nuts. Right. So like, how could a first-time buyer, how could a young family enter the market if they are, and that's not really fair, because those of us that purchased before this property value spike are greatly benefiting from this previous policy, and they're being penalized for it.
So an extra $1,000 on top of your mortgage, the interest that goes with that, that's a difficult maze to navigate.
It is. It's a real barrier to entry.
Wow. Well, they listened, and your win suggests that voters responded something much more personal than party labels, as you described.
Yes.
But there's still the presentation package, right? So what did you learn about the power of presence, trust, and showing up consistently?
I think all of those are key, and not only going to events where you may be welcomed, So there's different stakeholders that maybe they endorsed my opponent. I'm still showing up in every community event, whether they came down on the side of myself, my opponent, or stayed out of it. It's still showing up and not only listening to your own supporters and echo chamber. You have to really show up to all, and that's how you're going to change hearts and minds, by putting yourself in those rooms and then seeing what you agree on. And I, for the most part, find that most of us agree on 80 to 90% of issues, when you really break it down to even the greatest supporter of universal vouchers, almost to a person that I actually met in my community, not Tallahassee
Right.
lawmakers, of actual District 87 voters. They all agree, once they are educated and learn that there are no student outcomes reported with the vouchers and then the homeschool environment, that there is no accommodations for students with learning differences required in the vouchers and in the homeschool environment, and that the teachers aren't required to have the same level of expertise and credentialing. So when you explain that there's this really high level of accountability and really high standard that the public schools are held to, and that with our same tax dollars, the private charter and homeschool environments are not held to those same standards, particularly around student outcomes. I think virtually everyone would agree that at the beginning of third grade, the middle of third grade, and the end of third grade, you should have metrics to be assured that the child has made those learning gains that are so critical.
Right.
We know if a child isn't fully reading by the end of third grade, the outcomes for the rest of their life are impacted. My background's also public health and data, and I think that really served me well in this very purple, even red district, by just keeping the temperature low and talking about data and outcomes and not extrapolating and making it very partisan. That was, I think, a really big piece of how my message connected with people across the aisle, was just about data and facts.
I think, I'm just a guy. I think that I respond better to empirical fact as opposed to conjecture and, these open-ended leading kind of statements that tend to make that leave people who aren't indoctrinated, educated in a particular topic. It leads them to go to social media and, formulate an opinion out of 140 characters and take a stand without having, really the insight, knowing the nuts and bolts. So you being a first time politician, you're not carrying that baggage, of years in office and playing the game, the get along to stay, in power kind of thing. Do you feel that helped others see you as someone closer to their lived experiences? You're sharing the $5 gas price and you're not
Hmm.
being chauffeured around and you're going to work, on a 9 to 5 daily and you have children. You're dealing with stuff that these other cats have, nannies and whatever,
Staff.
staff. I'll say staff. Okay, I'll be politically correct. See, I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to sit at your feet at the same time as we're having this conversation. Talk to me.
Yeah, I think always showing up as your authentic self is critical if you want to earn someone's trust, which is effectively what you're doing when you're campaigning. And I am a person very much embedded in my community that is struggling with the same exact things that everyone else is. And I think that we would be so much better served if more of our legislators were held to that standard and to be more based in reality. And I think the only way to do that is to vote and to elect legislators that are not compromised, that are not doing what's best for their donors. And I think it's more of a challenge because there's just less coverage and education on the state legislator level. I actually think the amount of attention that is placed on DC is outsized compared to how much the state legislature impacts your life. The Florida State House and the state Senate, the Florida legislature, impacts my life far more than anything that happens in Congress. The housing policies, property insurance regulation, public education. I mean, that is all state level. The 6-week abortion ban, this anti-DEI legislation that was just passed this past session, the union busting legislation that's just been passed and signed by the governor. All of these impact myself and Floridians more than congressional decisions, but that's what gets 95% of the coverage. I think it's a product of like 24-hour news channels and several things that all ultimately go back to corporate interests,
Right,
and
right.
return to shareholder value. So I would just love people to tune in to their state house race and then vote in a way that reflects your values, because we really have an opportunity in November to put Florida on a different track. I truly believe that if the candidates, to include myself, because I'm back in it, got to return around and do it again,
Okay.
do the work and get in front of the voters and share our values, then we will be out of a super minority, which puts us on a track for a fully different Florida. We have then power. We right now, the state of affairs for the last 4 years is the Democrats have no power. The Republicans don't need to negotiate with us, so they don't. We saw that my very first vote was congressional redistricting. There was no questions on the Republican side, no debate. They limited our questions to 30 minutes, the debate for 45 minutes. The Calais decision came out while we were on the House floor. We asked time an hour, 2 hours to deliberate and read the Supreme Court decision. The Republicans said no. So it is just we're being absolutely steamrolled, and the policies reflect that. The policies are completely out of touch with the average Floridian, and we have to break the supermajority, which I do believe we will do in November.
From your mouth to whoever's ears, I don't ascribe any religious power to the politics stuff, but karma, universe, somebody, listen up. We're getting smashed here. It's wild. that what you said is really important. We don't usually, as the layperson, doesn't pay that much attention to local elections. Your librarian, your county treasurer, your all these things that work hand in hand to cooperate with the nationals in order
Mm-hmm.
to get these things done. So these are bad people. Let me say not bad people. These are, no, they're bad people with bad intentions that have come together as a collective and to support a horrible, horrible outcome for the American people. And it starts in our neighborhoods. We got to get out and
Mm-hmm.
vote. You know what I mean? So local elections like this, become national symbols,
Mm-hmm.
especially as I think, didn't we, this, you won on like International Women's Day or
Shortly
during
after.
women's shortly
Yeah.
after. So it was like International Women's Month or something like that. So that was dope, you know. But when a when a district includes a place politically recognizable like Mar-a-Lago, that sends it over the top. You're managing to keep the focus on local families while, letting everyone understand, yeah, I know that this win entered a national conversation, but that's not the focus. How do you and your team keep you grounded and moving in a consistent level and maintain those? Don't get sidetracked.
Yeah. I think that was our strength. The whole campaign was just a real focus on discipline. There are so many, things that are hurled at you that, can easily throw you off your game. But it's your job and your team's job, because all of your amazing volunteers will, you know, they're looking to you for leadership.
Right.
And that's your job, is to be that steady voice and say, that's noise. We're not gonna worry about that. So that we had a lot of it leading up to the campaign. There was, a lot of things that the other side said. There's some really unpleasant, mail pieces and messaging, and you just have to say, I know who I am. The point of that is to distract me and to throw me off my game, and I'm better than that, and we're better than that, and let's go knock some doors. There was the 2 Minnesota deaths during canvassing, and I remember I was feeling really, really happy one day. I came back from canvassing, and it had just been great. I just had great conversations. People said, you know what, this is really our time. Just a great day. And then I come home, and my husband says, there's been another death in Minnesota, Alex Preddy. And you're just like deflated. It's like we are trying so hard to fight for a fairer, kinder Florida, just like, our counterparts in Minnesota are fighting for justice for their neighbors and safety and just basic human decency. And then, it's my job to show up the next day and be that leader. And truly, a real silver lining of all of this hate and awfulness is that you do come to find that action is the antidote. Being in community with friends, new friends, people you've just met that day or through this process, that are willing to give up their Sunday, their Saturday, their Wednesday, and fight alongside you. That really matters. And that is what gives you that courage. And so while you're going to go through ups and downs, just continuing to show up, to be consistent, and to fight for the things you believe in, that's what this is about. That's what we're doing here. It's not because this is such an easy thing to do. It was Mar-a-Lago, and that's why it got so much attention. But it was also our Republican-leaning over 10 points district. So it's a pretty red district. I mean, it is not like +1. So I just believed that my neighbors were not these extremists, and that the result of this governor in the last year and a half and this president in the last year and a half, I just believe that my neighbors weren't approving of the direction our state and our country was going in. So staying consistent, showing up, and then being in community, that's really healing, and I think so important.
Yeah, I can see the connection, a deeper connection if you're, going to the grocery store, standing in the grocery line. People are coming to you. You said you're a health professional. People are coming to you to discuss those kind of issues. We're talking about, how much my cancer medication cost, or how much, my insulin cost, or my high blood pressure medications, or whatever. Being able to have just natural conversation as opposed to posed and scripted conversations, where you get stumped when someone asks you something off script. I think that endeared you perhaps even more. And damn it, she's a military wife, which means intestinal fortitude. You sit through a deployment, not hearing from your loved one when they're out on mission, and praying for the phone call and not a knock on the freaking door with the chaplain and two lieutenants. That's intestinal fortitude. That's someone who understands sacrifice. Our military spouses, thank you all. Actually, I'm a retired veteran of over 30 years service. And that woman of mine, that 22 years, she was just like, you got to get out of there, buddy. I'm getting to the end here. So
it's no joke.
It's no joke. And I have mad respect for you on that level. And then to, salute also your husband, who stepped up and said, it's my turn to back her. Let her take leadership. Women have been the backbone of our country for 250 years. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not only do they give birth to our soldiers and politicians and educators, and all you smart dudes, you can't do it without them.
Yeah, I think it would be, the Florida legislature would be well served to be a majority female.
I believe we need a female president too. I'm gonna say it. I ain't scared. I'm 63 years old. What are they gonna do to me? Nothing. I earned mine already. I just believe that we have to recognize that our women really are losing out. What the Supreme Court just did affected not only people of color, it affected anyone who benefited, from the act. So we're not gonna go down that. You kicked it off. There's some more people out there going, man, I wanted to do what you did. And I know that you're encouraging some people to step up to the plate. What local voices do you believe have been missing from Florida's broader political conversation? And how do you hope to bring those voices into Tallahassee?
Yeah, on the state house level, that is as just as maintaining and protecting my seat, I'm just as high a priority as winning 6 or more seats. I think we could win 10. I truly believe that we have amazing candidates this slate. I spent time last week in Orlando and Tampa, elevating some fellow candidates. I think it's a team sport. I think we have to really work together and not work in silos as a team, as a Democratic team. So that's really important to me because, as I said, nothing is harming us more as Floridians than the supermajority in the Florida legislature. That is truly oppressive, and we have to change it. And I think this is our opportunity to. So state house races, there's about 20 that are very competitive. So I'm spending a lot of energy. I've got a call later today with another candidate in Broward. Another local candidate just filed. So whatever I can do to be helpful. And truly, a lot of it is just listening, being there, because it's really hard. And two, just reminding them, stay focused, do the work. Go. If you feel like you got some nervous energy, go knock a door. Don't doom scroll. It's not about the Instagram. It's about talking to your neighbors. Go talk to a neighbor. go to a turf you haven't been to yet. You get your app and go knock some doors, and that's how you win. There's no substitute for ground game, because this seat was so high priority that House Republicans spent somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million. And that was no substitute for 140 canvassers and myself.
And
I think we knocked about 16,000, 18,000 doors, somewhere in there as a group. And then I personally knocked like 3,000.
I hope you wore padded knocking gloves. That's a lot. Not only do you have to protect yourself, yeah, I know, I'm goofy sometimes, but knocking those doors, that's courage. Stepping into a stranger's yard, stepping into a neighbor's yard who you really don't, to wave, and everything is good and everything's cool in the HOA area, but on the personal level, maybe not knowing their inner feelings and inner thoughts, and so that takes a lot of courage. So I salute you for stepping into the arena, putting on the whole armor of whatever it was that it took to get you there and sticking with it. And thank you for committing to going for the full run. Earlier you talked about kitchen table issues. People don't understand that because, we're in this multi-job, family where we may not sit down and have these conversations about financial, stability, and how to. Some people don't even know how to pay bills. You got to have a service to pay bills, but to have things like, affordability, education, insurance, which you mentioned, and family stability. Money, issues create stress. Political issues, differences of opinion create stress. How do those kitchen table concerns connect for you to the larger national governance conversation? And feel free to skip this question because I really don't want to. I'm really more impressed with the fact of how you galvanized and ignited a community. And you've already pointed out the importance of the local. But it does, and and not as a politician and not as, having as much understanding as you kind of touched on how it flows uphill, and then turns around and then runs downhill, the trickle down economics kind of stuff for people to understand. How do you feel it connects to the larger national conversation?
I think broadly what we see, and as you mentioned, I don't opine on like foreign policy and things that are outside the scope of the state house because I try to stay really focused. But I do think the parallel is not listening to your constituents and not, serving the greater good and serving your constituents and serving a need to keep power and maintain your donor class and to maintain that grip on power that you have. So I think that's the parallel, and that informs bad policy at the national level. But at the state level, I think big picture, it's important to note that about 30 years ago, the Republican Party made a strategic decision to invest in state legislatures. And they are far less costly. Your dollar goes a lot further in a state house race than it does in a congressional or Senate race. And then from the state house, not only do you have all of that power within the state, but as we just saw 2 weeks ago, you draw the congressional lines. Typically, you do it only every century. Every decade, rather, after every census. Florida Legislature 2 weeks ago decided to do it just because, and they gave us the map about 30 hours before we voted on it, and they gave it to Fox News before they gave it to us, the legislature. But that's drawing the map. That's all of the power in deciding what those congressional districts look like. So the state house itself is incredibly powerful, but it also power flows up to draw the maps, and it flows down because in Florida we see really grotesque overreach from the state legislature. It's a real attack on home rule. I was at a meeting with a town council member yesterday, and she was just describing, I was aware of most of the cycles, the sessions, attacks on home rule, but there was some small other ones that were it's just crazy. The Tallahassee, the state capital, wants to tell municipalities what they can and can build, what they can and can regulate. This town wanted to only use electric lawnmowers for their communal spaces, and then this piece of legislation says you cannot outlaw gas lawnmowers, which is just not the scope and purpose of a state legislature. Right. So there's a million examples like that, and they've also just been selling developments to their donors and overseeing, whether this local town, I live in Jupiter, whether they want another large scale development. But it's been, that power has been taken away from municipalities, and myself and my Democratic colleagues want to see the power back in municipalities and communities to make those decisions for themselves.
As they should. She can't say it. I can. It's grift, corruption, blatant, in our face, corruption. I'm not in Florida, but there are a bunch of Floridians, prominent Floridians, who are just slapping everybody in the face and getting billions. And as it trickles down to the state level, that may not be billions, but that's still millions. And then putting oneself in a position to lobby. Never mind. We're not going to do a civics lesson today. So many people don't even understand. They don't even teach civics in school anymore. I'm really,
hardly at all. It's horrible.
It's horrible. Thank you for putting up with my shenanigans on a Saturday.
Oh, I loved it.
Morning. I have one last question. It is a national question. Looking ahead, how do you want to use this platform to galvanize local voices so that the concerns of Palm Beach County families are not just heard in Florida, but understood as part of the national policy conversation? It's key to me. You see this gray hair? She said snowbirds, and it wasn't about the hair. It's them people who get away from the winters and, treat their aching bones 6 months in one day out of the year. But it's always been a retirement community. The elders tend to gravitate there and retire there. And so it really is part of a national policy conversation. Huge Medicare and recipient Social Security, retirement, SSI, and all that stuff in your state. So, I don't know how to rephrase it, but how are you thinking about pulling local voices onto the national level, making them recognize Floridians as human beings and not numbers?
Yeah, I think the opportunity that I have in this platform that I have is to show a different way. I think I have an opportunity to show a leadership that is grounded in community and stays focused in community. And by sharing examples of conversations that I have with neighbors, and by elevating their stories and their voices, I think that's one of the best ways I can serve my community, is by continuing to talk about the real issues and not be distracted, and staying really focused on my community and the things that they're really struggling with. They are really struggling. I don't know truly a neighbor whose door I knocked who wasn't struggling in some way. Mm-hmm. I mean, so few are able to save for the future. They're just trying to get by. Mm-hmm. And that's a real crisis. And it's particularly stark in an economy. The Florida economy has so much prosperity, and how we are choosing to spend those resources is problematic and it's not okay. And that's a big reason I got off the bench. So by continuing to tell my neighbors' stories, by continuing to advocate for attention at the state level, by continuing to fight for the values and equality and fairness and affordability, and just staying really authentic to myself and why I decided to do this crazy thing in the first place, I think that's the value that I have. And I think to the extent that people have responded well to that, I'm grateful just to be a voice championing the causes I believe in.
Mm. Lastly, for my scripted stuff, you are a lighthouse, for ships traveling in dark waters, trying to avoid the coral reef and ripping their hulls apart. And you've got a vast pool of people out there who may feel they're too new, too unknown, and too outside the political establishment to run for office. I know how I feel your story represents about the stepping forward. How do you feel? And what would you say to them? You're already doing it in private, one-on-one mentorship and that kind of thing. And as you prepare to run your own race, how do you translate that to others who are on the, like, maybe, how do you motivate them and ignite them as a leader yourself?
Learn from my experience. See that everything is possible. It is the status quo that wants to convince you that things are the way they are and they were always going to be the way they are. That's not true. Mm-hmm. It's just not. The only thing that's ever changed the trajectory of a state or a country is people getting off the bench. And if you are thinking about it, this is your push. I'm pushing you off the fence to say, do it. Fight for your neighbors. Fight for your community. If it's the school board, do it. If it's the county commission, do it. State ledge, do it. Whatever you feel called and you think that body would be improved by your presence, go do it, because we need different voices. We see that we are not being served by the status quo. And I would say your new eyes is a benefit. That's a strength. That is nothing to run from. In both the campaign and in my 6-week tenure as a legislator, I can tell you it served me, because I say, I don't see that. We don't have to do it that way. Little things, big things. I say, no, that's just because you've been operating it that way for 20 years and you say it has to be done that way. No, I don't accept that. And that's been one of my biggest strengths in my short term and moving forward in this new campaign is the possibilities are there. It's now up to us to go and forge a new path.
Amazing. Your Honor, is there anything that you might wanted to cover that I may have neglected?
No, I thought this was fantastic. And I hope if we get one person to run for office from this conversation, I will be overjoyed. And if, we get dozens, amazing. But that is the message, is that we need different voices. And I hope more people get off the bench. So I'm thrilled that we got to chat. And thank you for taking the time this Saturday morning.
I love it. I appreciate the opportunity. Okay, everybody. Florida State Representative, the Honorable Emily Gregory, District 87. Yeah, she did it. For those of you who are questioning and bitching and moaning, in the words of Obama, don't boo, vote. November midterms, state, local, and national. Get off the bench, get off the porch. Thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was
it.
great.
We're out of here.